Pepe exposed Trump begged Munir for an off-ramp, then rejected it. Here's why. Well, if there's some inside info, I want it.
21st of July, a lot is going on in the world, and our mission is to bring you the news that is not presented to you by legacy media and most of the independent media. And we do that by relying...
Yeah, the coverage of mainstream media on most topics is complete trash. The only time they have good coverage is maybe some natural disasters, where there's no real way to spin that one way or the other.
Upon trusted sources and talking to them all the time and trying to ferret out the facts from what is rumored. And we bring you only the facts that we believe to be actually grounded in reality. My friend, my colleague, Pepe Escobar is with me, and I will turn it over to him after a very brief request that please subscribe to our channel. That is how you support us. Please become a paid member. Go to our Substack, same name.
I'll give you a like for now. You have to earn my subscription.
$5 a month is the least we can charge. Kindly do that, and we will continue to be bringing you this.
But if you're watching on YouTube, definitely subscribe and to my channel and like the video.
Fantastic reporting that nobody else has. Thank you. And here is my dear colleague, Pepe.
Thanks, Mr. Z. Hi, everybody, our audience all over the world. Well, once again, this is a very special date, July 21st, because it's the day after deadline, D-Day. D-Day was yesterday, July 20th, and something, well, many things are overlapping, of course. This had been the deadline set by both Iran and China for the US basically to get down to business. Iranians were telling directly and indirectly, especially indirectly via the Pakistani mediators, to the White House, if you continue to bomb Iranian civilian infrastructure, all bets are off. And the response continues. And the response, when we look across the spectrum, not only across the Persian Gulf, but including...
It is true that Iran did give a warning that they would stop the tit for tat and go to full-scale war if the United States didn't stop the nonsense and the bombing. And that deadline has now passed, and Iran has been pretty consistently living up to their words, so there's no reason to doubt them this time either.
Jordan, and including Erbil in Iraq, the concerted, hyper well-organized and expanding counterattack by Iran to turn, essentially, the United States deaf, dumb, and blind all across the spectrum in terms of refueling bases,
radars,
intel, aerial reconnaissance, you name it. Is
radars. They took out the long-distance radars the first week of the war, and they actually took out, I think, a new one we brought in about a month ago. No, about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, they've done very good job of degrading American capabilities in the region. Most of these bases, the ones that are near Iran, are pretty much inoperable. That's why we're now keeping our planes all the way out here in Jordan. But now Iran's going after Jordan, so now we are going to start moving our planes and keeping them in Israel. It's a little bit further away, a little bit safer, and a lot of air defenses in Israel. But eventually, once they finish taking out Jordan, they'll go after Israel, our planes in Israel too. And they're forcing us out of the region, one missile and drone at a time.
Staggering. And of course, it's registering in some sectors of the Pentagon, not in many others. It's registering among military analysts who know what that means. And it is the graphic example in practice of how the Iranian strategy is clearly focused on expelling the United States geostrategically from West Asia. This is immense. It's in progress, and it gets more and more hardcore by the day. In parallel, we have, of course...
It's a smart strategy. One of Iran's demands was for the United States to get out of the region. Well, rather than going through the trouble of trying to get Trump to agree to that, with the way he backs out of everything he agrees to and is agreement incapable, as a lot of people call him, you just completely level U.S. bases until America can't station troops there. That is another very effective way to force America out of the region. Don't even need to get Trump's permission or acceptance of that fact. He could just force them out.
Frantic diplomacy. For instance, yesterday was the end of this deadline. Obviously, the Americans continue to bomb Iran, so the counterattacks by Iran will be even more hardcore than they were so far, and they are already extremely harsh. And China in the background, basically via the Pakistani mediators, they had told the Pakistani mediators, do anything you can do to bring the Americans back on the table and restart the MOU. Not a new MOU. The same MOU that was signed by both presidents. The commitments were being fulfilled by Iran, and the United States, of course, broke them all. We can say that they broke nearly.
Iran opened the Strait of Hormuz. It was letting ships through. It was living up to all its side of the agreement. But Trump didn't live up to any of our side. We didn't get Israel out of Lebanon. We didn't unfreeze assets. We didn't lift sanctions. We kept on bombing them. We broke everything.
90% of the MOU, the 14 points, which, by the way, President Trump signed in Versailles. But once again, Grandmaster Lavrov, the United States is non-agreement capable. The problem is the United States is absolutely desperate to get some sort of agreement because they are running against the clock, and the clock is controlled by Iran.
I have to say, if you wanted to fuck over Republicans in the midterms, I would start this Iran war right when Trump started it. It's the perfect time to guarantee maximum damage to Republicans in the midterms, because the oil stockpiles would only last 6 months, and so you're going to have 4 months of pain before the elections, of oil shortages, of disruptions, people not being able to afford gas. Yeah, so stupid.
More and more, day by day. So all headlines and all deadlines ahead of us point to the same excruciating pain to be suffered by the U.S. in less than 4 weeks, between 3 and 4 weeks, in mid-August, when we reach the critical point of the depletion of the strategic petroleum reserves.
Yep.
With direct consequences on the American economy and, of course, on the global economy as well. But, okay, let's go back to the back and forth, the diplomatic back and forth, which is usually immensely intriguing. Consider the mission that has landed in Iran and has met today with the top leadership in Pakistan from Iran, led by Interior Minister Momami. He met with, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. He met with Asim Munir, Field Marshal, special meeting. He met with his counterpart, Mokshin Naqvi, the Pakistani Interior Minister. But the most important element, and I posted a photo on my X account. Of course, it's not the exact moment, but it's an immensely interesting photo because we have Momami and Asim Munir sitting side by side and actively discussing something. What is this something? It's a special message, a special letter, which can be interpreted by being directly written by leader Mojtaba Khamenei or from his very tight inner circle, of course, with his absolute green light. But anyway, this came from the office of leader Mojtaba Khamenei, like previous letters would come from the office of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Same thing. Directly to the Pakistani leadership, hand delivered by Momami. So this means he flew from Tehran to Islamabad to deliver this letter. And basically, which is something that may appear counterintuitive to a lot of people. Essentially, by orders of leader Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran is tentatively agreeing to a 10-day pause, which would lead later on to a 60-day or 90-day pause, which means, for all practical purposes, a return to the MOU. But no.
Wait. I think that, yes, that's in Iran's interest, as long as it doesn't involve reopening the Strait of Hormuz. A pause to the firing, that's great for Iran. Iran doesn't need the destruction, doesn't need the missiles. Its leverage comes from the Strait of Hormuz. So let's find out more about this 10-day pause.
No details. We don't know, for instance, what the Iranians are asking in return. This is absolutely sealed from the Iranian side and from the Pakistani side. So for Iran, for Mustafa Khamenei to agree to something that was proposed essentially by Pakistan and Qatar with full Chinese backing, let's try at least a pause in the middle of all this madness. And then we try to resuscitate the MOU that cat. Apparently, the leadership in Iran agreed to the idea. But of course, they demanded something in return, and nobody knows exactly what they demanded in return. Essentially, what they are demanding, not very complicated, that the Americans fulfill their commitments. Because after all, it's still the same MOU. There won't be any additions or addendums or footnotes to the 14-point MOU already signed by both presidents. This means the Americans should go back to the table. Will President Trump agree to that? Quite unlikely. So far, the echoes that we have from the White House is that he already vetoed, and we have the usual officials, doing their dance around the Western mainstream media, saying that this 10-day pause is illogical. Well, nothing more illogical than the Trump presidency, but okay, but that's another story, of course. So this, once again, is the only off-ramp in town, and it's being offered by...
Here's the latest on Hormuz traffic, which is always good to know. Pretty complicated graph, but this right here is Hormuz traffic. It goes from full down to nearly nothing. It goes up with the MOU, then the United States starts doing bullshit and trying to open the Omani route and bypass Iranian control. Iran's unhappy, starts attacking ships, and then full-scale war resumes, and now it's back down to barely moving. And Brent price, of course, is going back up. But it's going to go a lot higher. Nice of them to have 130 here, but we're heading up here.
Intervention of Pakistani and Qatari mediators with help from China, and it was tentatively accepted by the Iranian leadership. And still, the President of the United States is kicking the ball when, and I wouldn't say upstairs, sideways, out of the stadium, certainly not, maybe over his own head somewhere. Go figure, right, Mr. Z? Well, this brings us, of course, to the intergalactic blah, 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 typical of American mainstream media.
Well, the key thing here is Iran offered to do a 10-day pause in the fighting. What I'd probably guess is that they're asking for the United States to fulfill its obligation in the MOU, which is lift sanctions, release funds, and Trump wasn't willing to do that. And so this went nowhere.
Obviously, copying their headlines and the spin from the Israeli masters. There seems to be, for Trump, two options on the table. Number one, basically declare victory and run away, which will be the plan B compared to the plan A now.
That won't work, because if he runs away, that's giving Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz, and that will be seen as everyone as a victory for Iran, because Iran will charge a toll. Also, number two, you can't just run away, is that leaving Iran in charge of the Strait of Hormuz doesn't solve the issue. Traffic in the Strait of Hormuz will not go all the way back up to pre-war levels if Iran is charging a toll because of sanctions. Because Western ships can't pay the toll to Iran without getting hit by sanctions, and so Western ships won't be able to pass the Strait of Hormuz unless the United States lifts sanctions on Iran, or at least opens a hole in it saying you're allowed to pay the toll. Unless the United States does that, even if the United States withdraws and lets Iran control the straits, like more than half the ships that would normally go through the straits will not be able to, because they can't. They're afraid to pay the toll, and because they'd be hit by sanctions. So that's the humiliation for Trump. Even if he walks away, he has to give Iran control of the straits. He has to lift or tweak sanctions to allow Iran to collect the toll. And those are two steps to get oil flowing again. And they're very humiliating for Trump.
At the table, which is, okay, let's have a 10-day pause and try to restart negotiations. No. As we all know, Trump presidency does not negotiate. They don't understand the meaning of negotiating. Negotiating means diplomatic exchanges, means respecting.
It's really sad. The president who supposedly wrote The Art of the Deal is engravement incapable. That's how most of the world views him. He's not, can't make a deal with Iran, can't make a deal with Russia. and that's because of who he surrounded himself with. He basically asks Iran for complete surrender when Iran is winning the war. It's retarded. It's brain dead. You can't ask, when you're in a horrible negotiating position, you can't just then ask for the sun and moon.
The other part, they never do. So let's say this is off the charts. Number two, which is what is being pressed, of course, by those media in the US that pose as journalism, but are in fact Mossad and IDF channels, basically PSYOP operations posing as journalism, is that the US and Israel would be concocting a massive return of the war to force Iran to capitulate. If that was, anybody with an IQ over 2 knows that this is absolutely impossible.
Yes, when we started the war, at least we had all these operational bases from which to attack Iran, and now these ones are practically unusable. Our ability to hit Iran is lower. We don't have 3 aircraft carriers in the region anymore. I think we only have 2 or 1 maybe. Our posture in terms of being able to attack Iran is just much, much weaker now than it was at the start of the war.
But that brings us to another element that surfaced yesterday on D-Day, which is the maritime blocking of Saudi Arabia by Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces. This destabilized the whole game completely. Even if it's not a blockade of the Bab al-Mandeb, this has to be made very, very clear. Sana'a is not blocking the Bab al-Mandeb. Sana'a, and if you read carefully their official statement, something that I did 3 times at least, it's written over there. This is a siege for a siege. Sana'a, Ansar Allah, they are under blockade and under siege by the Saudis for almost 12 years. Very few people around the world know about this.
I knew about it, but to be fair, I only learned about it recently. I didn't realize the extent of the siege.
But this is a total blockade of Ansar Allah, Yemeni armed forces, and includes the blockade of Sana'a International Airport. Before their planes, the Yemeni planes, were destroyed by Israel last year, the only way to get to Iran was flying Yemen Airways from Amman in Jordan. So this was a deal between the government in Amman in Jordan and Ansar Allah. This is exactly what I did last year when I went to Yemen. You have to fly to Amman, then you go through a relatively complex logistical operation. They give your boarding card only at Amman Airport, and you board a Yemen Airlines flight from Amman to Sana'a. And over there, back. Vice versa, the same thing. It's the only way to fly in and out of Amman. It was until they bombed, the Israelis bombed the airport and bombed all Yemen Airlines planes. They have less than 0 aircraft.
They have 0 aircraft. You can't have less than 0.
So they are in the process of trying to buy some aircraft. They could probably buy from Iran, for instance. So
Israel is a bastard also for doing this. Buying all planes of a country. Israel is a bastard.
What happened only a few days ago, and only a few weeks ago? Iran de facto broke the blockade because they flew a Mahan Air flight from Tehran to Sana'a to pick up the Yemeni delegation that was invited to go to the funeral rites of Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran. And only a few days ago, they were returning, many of these members, plus some other Yemenis who were in Iran for a number of reasons. The plane was absolutely packed. And while the
families, women and children.
Plane was approaching Sana'a International Airport, the runway was bombed by the Saudis. And the Iranian pilot, did an absolutely outstanding maneuver, a 90-degree Hail Mary pass. He turned west and managed to land at Hodeida Airport by the Red Sea, whose runway, by a miracle from God, had been repaired only a few days ago. Can you imagine if it was not repaired at all? You have to literally land in the Red Sea. So this was Iran breaking the blockade. Well, there was a Yemeni response, 2-1. They bombed 1 Saudi civilian base and 1 Saudi military base. And after that, they proclaimed a naval blockade of Saudi Arabia, a siege against a siege, a blockade against a blockade. They have been subjected to blockade for almost 12 years. So this is where we were yesterday, and of course, everybody was puzzled, startled, and awaiting a total conflagration between Riyadh and Sana'a, which did not happen. Information that we have, and I want to have a confirmation from you, Mr. Z, from our Pakistani sources, is that Pakistan basically told Saudi Arabia, stand down. Why?
Correct.
Because anything that Saudi Arabia would, yes, you were just confirming it, Mr. Z, Zach.
Yes,
Yes, that's what I've heard too.
Saudi Arabia would do anything, it will be against their own interests. And now this blockade officially is on. So several, I think over 30 Saudi Arabia tankers, they are around the port of Yanbu because they have nowhere to go. They cannot cross the Bab al-Mandeb because the Ansar Allah, Yemeni Armed Forces and Yemeni Navy, Sana'a, imposed the blockade, and the blockade is on. So this is something that will have to be addressed in the next few hours and days. But
And you have to understand, if they were Saudi tankers, for example, were due to arrive to go to Pakistan here, and this is like a 10-day trip. But if they were to go around Africa, which it's not a complete blockade, there is an alternate route. It's just that alternate route is quite lengthy. You go out, it's compared to this little trip here, it's 6 times as long, maybe 7 times as long to go all the way around. Let's go with 6 times as long. Now you're talking 2 months. 2 months for these tankers to go from here to Pakistan instead of 10 days. And Pakistan was expecting the oil in 10 days. Now the strait is closed. The tankers have to think to themselves, well, should we start going around? But what happens if after 1 month this opens again? And now they're all the way over here. They still have 30 days. If they could just negotiate this open again, it'd be far faster to just wait here and go to Pakistan. So that's probably why the tankers aren't moving anywhere right now. It's, do you commit to a 2 month trip around to go to Pakistan, or do you hope that somehow the Houthis can be convinced to open the Red Sea? What a decision for those Saudi tankers.
the most important part from yesterday to today in terms of the US-Iran war is this response by the leadership in Tehran that they would accept a 10-day pause, already blocked by Trump without, of course, any explanation, no rational explanation why he is refusing, once again, an off-ramp delivered at his door, to his lap. And
because he doesn't want to surrender to Iran. The MOU is a document of surrender to Iran, and he never intended to live up to it. He just wanted to open the Strait of Hormuz and open the Omani route and maybe try to wrest control of the Strait of Hormuz from the Iranians. No, yes, he wants the oil flowing again, but he isn't willing to do what's necessary, surrendering to Iran to make it happen.
of course, what will happen in the next few days, apart from a possible massive preparation for some sort of massive operation against Iran with the help of Israel? And then all bets are off, and this will be the culmination of the escalation ladder, which has been escalating nonstop for over a week now. So this is where we are at the moment. Is there a glimpse of rationality on the horizon? Yes, there is. Even though Iran runs the clock, even though Iran will never abdicate from their control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Agreed.
And at the same time, Iran and the US both know that the key, absolutely key, geopolitical factor in the whole war is about the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, agreed.
And of course, this will imply the Americans recognizing that what they had before, or what everybody had before the war that they launched against Iran, will never come back. And when we talk about the possibility of Iran, I'm sorry, Donald Trump.
When Trump bombed Iran's supreme leader, he gave the Strait of Hormuz to Iran. That's the truth of it. We're never getting it back.
Declaring victory and walking away. This means admitting.
It was the threat of bombing Iran into oblivion, of killing Iranian leaders. It was that threat that kept Iran from closing the straits. But after we bombed the supreme leader, there's not only does it give them a reason to close the straits, to hit back at us, but we no longer have the threat that stayed their hand before because Supreme Leader is dead.
I think the strategic defeat, which for somebody with his Milky Way-sized ego is absolutely impossible. So once again, we are in the middle of an impasse. There is a diplomatic track in action via Pakistan and Qatar, of course, with Chinese input in the back, and with some, I would say, direct collaboration from the Iranian leadership, because after all, they have nothing to lose. Well, okay, 10-day pause. Okay, as long as we have...
No, I think part of how Trump convinced China to open the spigots on its oil reserves and lower its imports of oil, one thing that has helped us not run out of oil, is A, he said he wouldn't sell arms to Taiwan, but B, his promise to go to sign an MOU with Iran. He says, okay, I'm going to sign this with Iran, but I need you to help me out to keep the world afloat with oil until then. And so China went along. And it's not, I don't think, coincidence that the MOU falls apart and China starts importing oil again. I think Trump broke whatever deal he had with China when he started bombing Iran again and didn't live up to the MOU.
Diplomatic negotiations. Are we going to have that? It's practically impossible. But at least the benefit of the doubt is now in the middle of the process. There is a possibility. It's a very, very slim. Very, very slim. And it does not address the fact that now we have a de facto blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, in terms of the Bab al-Mandeb, the blockade that matters. Okay, even if other tankers can cross the Bab al-Mandeb back and forth, the Saudis cannot. This means 4.5 million plus barrels of oil a day exported east-west pipeline, Port of Yanbu, through the Bab al-Mandeb to Asian clients is out of the picture.
Yep.
So this is, let's say, if the Bab al-Mandeb is the Yemeni's nuclear card,
this might be good for Europe, though, because that oil can still go to Europe. Of course, a lot of the demand is from Asia, so a lot of the tankers are just staying here, hoping that this will get open again. Not wanting to commit to a long way around.
They played, let's say, a half nuclear card so far, with the possibility of escalating if, of course, there is an American attack, a massive American attack, especially against even more Iranian infrastructure. And something that I had the privilege to confirm with one of my top Yemeni sources, and who became a friend since last year when I visited. He explained to me why now. Everybody knew and know that blocking the Bab al-Mandeb is a nuclear card. The Yemenis were keeping it for the last minute. Why now, and why now?
I think Saudi are the one that chose this. If Saudi hadn't bombed the airport, I think they would have held off on closing the Red Sea. But when Saudi Arabia bombed the airport and basically angered the Houthis, they said, okay, yeah, we're not waiting anymore. We're doing this now. And Iran had no reason to refuse.
Now only against the Saudis. This is not against everybody. He told me because Yemeni intel, side by side with Iranian intel, they talk to each other all the time. And once again, unlike absolute idiots in American mainstream media who say that Sana needs to wait for an order from Tehran to do this and that, this is now how things work in practice. Mm-hmm. The few of us who have actually been...
They're allies, no, not proxies in reality. They're similar, but that means allies, you don't control what your allies do. You maybe have a lot of influence over your allies, but you don't absolutely control them.
To Yemen, to Sana and Sada in my case, and talk to members of the political council of Ansar Allah. There are 11. As far as I remember, I talked to at least 5 of them. And they explained to me in detail how decisions are made in Yemen. It's a very complicated process and involves everybody. It involves leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi, involves the political council, and involves their parliaments. Only when a very fateful decision goes through examining in these 3 different spheres and comes back to Abdul Malik al-Houthi, then they implement it, which was the case with this siege for a siege. So my friend told me, yes, because we identified that the Americans and the Israelis are planning a massive attack, not only against us, but against the whole axis of resistance. And that includes against Iran, against Nasrallah, against Hezbollah, against Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq.
Yeah. Israel has been quiet these last 2 weeks. Maybe because they were preparing this.
So a mega offensive against the axis of resistance. So this move is to preempt that. And obviously the move, the Americans went completely berserk, first of all, because they were not expecting it. And second, because they are still analyzing why they didn't block the Bab al-Mandeb completely. Of course, because that's not the point. It's very specific. They are trying to blockade a blockade. And there is an MOU between Sana'a and Riyadh. So Riyadh broke the MOU that they had with Sana'a with the bombing of their airport. So now the Yemenis are they have they have the rights to block the Saudis. And this will have to be resolved diplomatically. By whom? By Pakistan? We don't know. Could be. But Pakistan, of course, for the moment, the position is a bit, Pakistan was caught. Nobody was expecting this move, especially yesterday, out of the blue, literally. And now Pakistan, which has a military pact with Saudi Arabia, they have to tell the Saudis, look, you brought this on yourselves, and don't drag us into your problems like this. You caused this problem to
Yes, Saudi bombed the airport. It wasn't unprovoked.
yourself. You have to try to solve it diplomatically. We can help you to solve this diplomatically. But don't expect us that we're going to start bombing Sana'a tomorrow just because we have a military pact with you. It's completely absurd. So I think this may give all of you a glimpse of the complexity and how dangerous the situation is, even if we have a few, I would say a very, very slim on the razor's edge way out, which for the moment is not being accepted by the President of the United States. Mr. Z, take it away, please.
Well, I could not have said it better. Thank you very much for that excellent analysis about the entire region. I do have something to add, though, Pepe, because as all audiences know, you know, I have the privilege of talking to some people who are very close to what is going on in Islamabad. And just before we came
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard enough from the Pakistani perspective.
on the air, I was speaking to one of them who, in fact, has good information. And he told me that the softening from the Iranian side of their very hard position is that, yes, we are going to consider the 10-day pause. However, big however, no promises, performance on the first day. The first day. If we come to the table and we say this is a 10-day pause, you are going to perform that day. That
Absolutely.
Day. Now,
and that will include, for instance, relieving sanctions,
everything.
Everything.
So,
yes, please go ahead.
So this is our major insight into what is going on in Islamabad as we speak, literally as we speak.
Okay.
That Mujtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader,
And this video is from 2 hours ago, so...
gave a personal letter to be delivered. I mean, I do not know if it's a letter or if it's a message, but the direct message comes from him and supported by Pezeshkian and the entire leadership. Yeah, you talk about a 10-day pause. You want us to do that? Okay. However, can you perform? To Trump, can you perform? And this is where things are. Now, this gentleman, who is very high up in our intelligence circles, shared with me that they have tried to impress this upon Mr. Trump through Asim Munir, who has the ability to talk to him, that this is your off-ramp. Yeah, this is your off-ramp. Please take it. Please take the off-ramp to Trump. And so far, Trump, with his great...
The MOU is a document of surrender by Trump to Iran. And Trump doesn't want to honor it.
Intellect has not appreciated the fact that if he doesn't take that, he's trapped.
It's absolutely.
He's completely trapped. He's got nowhere to go. So one other thing that I can add, which I think we have discussed previously, but I can emphasize that, again, coming from the same source, that while this is going on, the Iranian leadership have green-lit the development of all atomic activities, whatever they may be. We do not know. They reserve the right at the time of their choosing, if that unfortunate time comes, to demonstrate to the world that they have the atomic ability that now puts them into the same category as North Korea.
In other words, Iran has a bomb. We first heard rumors of this by Larry Johnson a month ago, practically. My bet is when I say Iran has bomb, they have all the parts, like 99% assembled bomb, that just needs a few screws in, and then they have the bomb. It may not be assembled right now, so they technically don't have a nuke yet, but they could easily assemble. And I'd say it'd probably be between 3 and 6 of them, because you don't want to declare a nuclear power state, state, and you only have 1 or 2 bombs. No. And then you blow one of those 2 up as a demonstration. No, if they do a nuclear test, they have good thing to 6 bombs probably.
So things are not good for Mr. Trump.
And this
Things are not good for Mr. Trump.
And that would be a disaster for Trump. Imagine this: he starts the war, and before the war, Iran doesn't have a nuke. He doesn't have control of the straits. At the end of the war, American bases in the region are destroyed. Iran has a nuke, and it controls the Strait of Hormuz. How does he spin that as a win? I don't think even Asmongold would be stupid enough to buy it.
If this, this non-stop rumors of a possible massive American campaign, again, restarting the war, if that happens, this is absolutely the green light for, as already expressed by President Pezeshkian, as already hinted by leader Mustafa Khamenei, as already voted by the Majlis. That's it. We're going to have to reconsider our nuclear doctrine, and everybody knows what that means. So it depends on the level of the next American attack, the depth level and the seriousness of the next attack, which is brings us once again to the absolutely dementia proposition that not only Trump, but some of his CENTCOM generals actually believe that they can make Iran fold or blink. There will be no folding. There will be no blinking. There's no other way to solve this apart from a diplomatic process. It's the MOU or literally nothing. In fact, it's the MOU as we know it at the moment, the dead cat as we know it at the moment, or a total war.
Just checked. Iran hasn't yet withdrawn from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. So not as yet. They've threatened it. And they could do it at any moment.
Literally.
But if they do withdraw from the treaty, I think that the nuclear test would happen probably within 48 hours. It's too risky otherwise. You're announcing your intent to get a bomb. You have to instantly do the test.
And will the United States win the total war? No, they don't have the equipment. They don't have the weapons. They don't have the intel. They don't have the ground intel. They don't have the planning. They don't have the base.
And Iran is backed by Russia and China. It's a mountain fortress of a country. Yeah, see this mountain fortress of a country. And the United States has no way to control the flow of weapons into Iran from China or from Russia. No, the United States can't win.
This more and more to inflict a devastating blow to Iran. And on top of it, how they're going to inflict a devastating blow to a country where 90 million people are showing national cohesion to fight to their death to defend themselves and their sovereignty. This is absolutely impossible. So even psychologically, the Americans cannot win anything. But Mr. Z, once again, try to impress these basic facts into the mind of a narcissistic megalomaniac behaving like a 4-year-old throwing tantrums. We all know it's impossible. But this is where we are once.
Yes, Trump is definitely throwing a tantrum. That's how I referred to it over the last few days. This last round of escalation, this bombing, it's Trump's last big tantrum fit before he's forced to surrender to Iran.
Again.
This is where we are. The only very, very small ray of hope that I can add to everything that you just said, which I completely support, is that this maniacal child who has no intelligence and is in fact demented, this is my characterization, has been calling Asa Munir. That has not stopped. His calls to Asa Munir have not stopped. Asa Munir has finally responded, which I think Larry and I hinted at yesterday, that, oh yeah, I have a response for you. And the response was, as you very completely explained, that sure, we'll consider it. Are you ready to perform? And there he pauses. Trump pauses. No. He just wants to talk. And Iran says, no more talk.
Yeah, that is definitely Iran's position. No more talk. Action. We've had enough of talk. Trump has been talking supposedly to Iran since like week 1 of the war. Talk. Sometimes these talks are completely imaginary. Sometimes they're messaged by pigeon carriers or Pakistan. Very few rare cases, they're actual negotiations, but the talk has produced nothing. The United States has not given 1 inch despite losing the war. So Iran's not having it anymore. We need the oil shortage. That's what gets Trump to finally capitulate. Bombs will keep flying until then. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you in next video. Iran planned devastation coming. Let's hear what this is.
BEGGED, the foreign ministry spokesman, who is often the face of the Iranian regime itself. And what did he say that surprised you?
His position was this, that they want to negotiate. Like, their position is always to negotiate. They want peace. The number one thing is peace. But then he said, we're always willing to defend ourselves. And he always talked about how even their military actions are from a defensive perspective as opposed to an offensive perspective. And so he said, look, we always want to deal. We always want to negotiate, but we're willing to defend ourselves from a military perspective. But that being said, in terms of from the military perspective, we have put a large number of things in place in order to defend ourselves. And so we talked about some of those issues, and not just with him. I talked about other key members of Iran, not just the foreign ministry, but other aspects, which I don't want to say because I don't want to get in trouble. But I talked about a number of people, and I kind of have an overarching idea about what the plan is. And I think the plan is this. They're not going to strike.
I'm seeing down here the headline, Iran is becoming another forever war. And I just want to point out that no, it can't. It can't become a forever war because it is all the oil in tons and tons of oil are right in this region, and natural gas and fertilizer and everything. And if you have a forever war, then that means the Middle East oil production is permanently disrupted, and the world can't afford that. Iran can't become a forever war. The region is too important for the world. In the past, you could have war between Iran and Iraq, and there was still oil going out of the Gulf because there weren't drones. Missiles were far more primitive. Iran really didn't have the means to control the Strait of Hormuz. Nowadays, Iran has an ability to control the straits that no one can take away. So there cannot be a permanent war with Iran, or there'll be a permanent blockade over the Strait of Hormuz. And the world can't afford that.
Strike, as an example, Israel first. But they are expecting Israel to strike at some point. And I think what's happened is because Israel's become aware of Iran's strategy, now you've seen, for example, a lot of statements coming out today. There was a statement from Smotrich saying that they don't want to join the war. They like it as it is now. And the reason for that is because if you remember, I came to your show, I believe it was on your show, when I said Iran's in 7 to 10 days, they're going to plan something big
Yes.
is coming.
Yes, I
And
remember
now-
that.
Yeah, so it was on your show. And so now we're about 3 to 5 days away from that, and they are planning something huge, which is going to be quite devastating. They're going to be using a lot more missiles that they've never used before, and the mode and method that they're going to use has never been used before. And what I mean by that is if you look up to the lead up to these...
Something we've never seen before. I'm looking forward to the fireworks.
7 to 10 days, what's happened is Iran has systematically taken out, essentially, if you look at it, Israel's defense. There's other aspects to it as well we'll talk about. Oh, yeah, brilliant. You've got it on that. So they've taken out Israel.
All of these are very degraded, and then they've been attacking over here too.
Israel's defense. And so if you look at, for example, Jordan was basically the early radar systems in Jordan, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, the air defense systems, the aviation facilities and hangars, the logistical hubs, the fuel and ammunition storage, CENTCOM infrastructure. All of these things, the way Iran viewed it was there was 2 methods for it. One, and actually 3. The other one is the ground invasion part, which we'll talk about later. But there's 2 methods with it. One is the military bases within those regions, but the other one is the defense of Israel. And so if you remember, in the first element of the war, the Ramadan war, they took out the Al Udeid air base, the radar system in there, which was worth $1 billion. And that radar system was warning
Another thing Asmongold never found out about.
Israel. It was given it like a 15-minute warning, and once that radar system was taken out, the warning time was reduced significantly. And now what they've done is, with this mechanism, taking out Muwafiq Salty air base, striking it significantly, as well as Bahrain and Kuwait, you basically have it where there's less warning for these missiles. Then you've got the issue with the defense interceptors, and then if Jordan's not able to defend them, you're basically going to have open season on Israel. And so Israel's kind of seen these moves being made, and obviously they're not stupid. They realize that this is a tactical mode that is being implemented by Iran, which has been escalatory over this time, and they're expecting something huge within 3 to 5 days. The thing with Iran is, which obviously some of us may not agree with this, but their thing is we don't want to strike Israel until they strike us. And so Israel's in this quagmire where they want to be part of the war because
they hate Iran and want to attack it, but they see that as they attack it, they're going to get hit ultra hard.
Trump is kind of struggling to get too deep into the war in terms of if you look at the attacks that are occurring. But at the same time, they're so afraid of the consequences that you're basically in this quagmire. So Israel's kind of in this situation. Will they respond or not? But if they do, there's going to be a significant response against them and that response will be ready in 3 to 5 days.
Do you have any sense for, what that's going to be? What is going to be the target? I mean, we just had this up here a second ago talking about the things that they have been hitting here of late. But what is that to set up? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so that's that element. And then there's a second important element. People in Iran, and I've talked to a number of people, and, we may disagree with this, but I don't. I think they obviously know better. They've got the intel. They believe that there's highly likely going to be an attempt at I know this is going to annoy you, Daniel, but they do believe that there is going to be a chance of a ground incursion. And so into one of the islands in close to them, likely Karg Island. And so obviously they have traps within Karg Island if that decision was made. But more than that, they said to me that they're seeing accumulation of forces in Kuwait. This is why they're striking Kuwait. Also, in terms of the Kurds, they do believe that the Kurds are still going to try and go in. They don't believe the story that, we got the weapons and we stole the weapons of the, when Trump said, we gave the weapons to the Kurds and they kind of took them. They don't believe that story. Yeah. They believe that those weapons, that's just, subterfuge. And in reality, they are going to attempt to go in. And so this is why you've seen the consistent attacks on Erbil, on Soleimania, in order to weaken any opportunity for Kurdish forces to try and go in. So there is this notion of belief that that's happening. So this is why they're striking Kuwait so significantly. This is why you're seeing almost consistent, persistent attacks on Kurdish areas in Iraq.
Because if the United States does try something like to take Karg Island, I'm sure that would occur at the same time as invasion from the Kurds from Iraq. So it would be simultaneous. Because if you're going to hit someone, you hit them hard. You invade from 2 fronts.
Iraq. And then separate to that, they are weakening American forces. First of all, removing them far away from Iran as possible. The reason, again, is because they're aware, they're fully aware of the crisis that the U.S. has in terms of oil, petroleum, and fuel. And so they want to try and move them across. They literally there's someone in Ghalibaf's department whose sole job is to basically keep track live the oil reserves in the United States of America. And so you basically have it where...
I believe that 100%.
You're trying to push the U.S. out more because, again, the further you are, the more fuel you're going to use. And so there's kind of like a multi-pronged attack that's going on, and then you can see the fruits of that by the attacks that are...
all these attacks the United States is doing is running through our jet fuel reserves. It's draining them.
Occurring.
And what is the objective of these ramping this up? Would it be to cause the United States to come back to the table? Because there's one thing, actually, before we get too far away from your conversation with Ismail Bagai, is I think it was yesterday I saw, if I'm not mistaken, Abbas Araghchi, who said he still felt that there was like a 10% chance that there could be a negotiated settlement, which really surprised me because I'm thinking with what we did in 2025, what we did to start this war, what we did with the MOU came out. I mean, we never keep our word on anything. I don't know why they would want to abide by anything. I mean, it's not just the Strait of Hormuz, but it's also the frozen assets. It's the sanctions on the energy.
Instead of removing sanctions on Iran, as the MOU required, we added new ones.
$100 billion. I mean, they're not talking about any of this stuff. Iran literally got nothing out of this except for a temporary opening of the Strait of Hormuz where they got some of their oil out. But so why would they trust us for anything at all and even contemplate this alleged 10-day ceasefire that some are talking about? Or do you think that's actually realistic at all?
Yeah, I mean, look, they said to me they don't trust the United States of America. They do not believe that they basically will commit to any deal that they make. That being said, they said that, look, we need to be pragmatic. You can't have a scenario where you're not willing to negotiate with the enemy because that just means you're going to have perpetual war. So there's going to be a scenario throughout this entire period of time where there will be negotiations. Now, as you said, there is this kind of thought, and that's why he said 10%. That
I think it's going to be the same type of negotiations the Russians are constantly having, which is the West just wants complete surrender of Russia, and Russia says, no, we're not going to do that. They have negotiations. This is what we want, and the West is still demanding complete surrender, and so negotiations never go anywhere.
It's highly unlikely those deals will ever come about because the U.S. is incapable of fulfilling any deal. But that being said, the psychology is that they want the deal. The psychology is that they've got responsibility for the Iranian people and they don't want Iran to be under perpetual war. So there is this, no doubt, Abbas Araghchi, what he's saying is the feeling.
They can't. Strait of Hormuz is too important. There can't be perpetual war, not with Iran.
In the foreign ministry, he obviously is the head of the foreign ministry and the government, which is that they are willing.
China would join the war if the United States truly decide to just keep on attacking and doesn't care about the Strait of Hormuz anymore. China would get involved and shut, and I mean on Iran's side, to put an end to nonsense.
To make a deal. It's just that they don't believe the US will. And the way they see it is this, because I discussed it with them, I said, look, I do think that, if you look at the entirety of the war, okay, there's one thing, but if you look at each part, and they agreed with me on this when we were having the conversation, that if you look at each part of the war as a separate stage, then from Iran's perspective, they believe that they've won each element of the stage, and you've got to look at each stage as its unique element. And so what I mean by that is, if you look at the first stage, the first 39 days, they told me that Trump basically within week 2 was asking for a deal, was asking for a ceasefire, and they continued it going. And even till the end, there was disagreement between Galibaf and Pezeshkian. Pezeshkian wanted the deal, as in he said, look, let's just make the deal. And Galibaf wanted to delay it by another week. And they came to like something in the middle, hence why the deal happened when it happened. But when they look at the first 99 days, they said, look, we won the kinetic power, we weakened the United States of America, we weakened their bases and the defense interceptors. Then you look at the next element. The next element was where it was essentially Iranian vessels coming out and not much American vessels coming out. So they've seen themselves as, again, winning that element of the economic aspect. Then you had the blockade. Now, the blockade was more of a wash, as in they feel like they shaded it a bit. They got some vessels out, but it wasn't as successful as the other parts, but it wasn't as successful as the United States of America. So they see that as a slight victory, maybe like a wash. And then the MOU, the way they see it is, the U.S. obviously did not fulfill it.
Well, it's interesting seeing what Iran thinks of all that's happened so far.
Anything in the deal, except one thing, which was they allowed the oil to be unsanctioned, which meant Iran was able to sell about 70 million barrels. They made something between $7 to $10 billion. And the U.S. never got anything. So in that element, they see it as like a victory, as in they managed to get that income in. Some of that money is going to be used for the military. Some of the money is going to be used for the people. And that's just going to help them as the war continues. And now they see it as this current part of the kinetic war. You're seeing where Trump, the way they see Trump's attacks is, he just continues to attack the South. And this is their position, which is he continues to attack the South. He continues to attack the same regions continuously. Sometimes he's attacking the same spots over and over and over again. Whereas what you're seeing with Iran is a systemized approach where they're taking out the bases, they're weakening the bases, they're removing the radar systems, they're removing the ability to defend those areas as well as the areas, as well as Israel. And so the way they're seeing it is, once again, they're succeeding in this element. And this is what I've been told. I've been told that once again, Trump is actually desperate for a deal. And the 10 days you're referring to is actually Trump has been on the call with Field Marshal Assa Mania almost every day, but very consistently. When I say Trump, I mean the Trump administration, begging to get back to negotiations. Iran's stance is, and this is what I've been told, and again, it doesn't mean that this will be the final conclusion, but their stance is that the MOU now is suspended. If you want to go back to the table, there's going to have to be more concessions made, because once again, you attacked our country and broke the MOU and went against Article 5 and Article 1, but specifically Article 5 in this occasion. And so you can't be trusted. They told me, actually, this is what Ismail Bagai told me. He said, look, we were fulfilling the MOU. The MOU said, Article 5, the arrangements need to be done by Iran. And he told me this before. I can't remember if he said it in the interview, but he said the arrangements need to be done by Iran. We had 30 days. In those 30 days, they said we need to negotiate with Oman. We need to negotiate with the other Gulf states. He said we were doing that. We were negotiating with everybody. We were bringing everybody on board as part of the conversation. We were developing the conversation. And we were speaking about to Oman, as per the MOU, that after the 30 days, there would be a joint administration of the Strait of Hormuz. But then the Americans end up trying to create this new corridor. And this new corridor, what they're seeing it as is a affront on the Article 5, but also they believed that there is some kind of, from a military perspective, from a security perspective, there was a major issue as well in terms of the Americans having access to that as well. So this is the reason why they had to stop.
And that came on the I remember, because I've shown that headline here a couple of days ago. That came on the 24th of June, 7 days after the signing of the MOU. So we immediately tried to set up this southern corridor on Oman, so we can imagine. And let me ask you if you have any insider knowledge about what was going on in Oman that got them, because they were working kind of with Iran, and that's why it was in the MOU in paragraph 5. But now all of a sudden, apparently, the United States put a lot of pressure on Oman to get them to agree to open this corridor. Do you have any insight into that?
It's exactly what you said. This is what I was told. I was told that with Oman, Iran doesn't have any problems with Oman. They were negotiating with Oman, but Oman, not being a very strong nation, has been bullied by the United States of America. And because they've been bullied by the United States of America, they've basically put themselves in a situation where they are not abiding by the MOU, and they are not basically standing up to the United States of America. And they're just like a weak nation in the sense of they've been bullied into the current situation.
Yeah.
And but I mean, if the United States, and this would seem to even still undercut the diplomatic path and the diplomatic folks in the Iran who wants to get back to that, because if we, with 7 days in, went and gummed up the works here on what was our own interest. It was our interest to get that thing open as soon as possible to get the flow of oil going back into the global market for everybody's price to come down. And yet we interjected in there almost as though, and I don't know if you've heard anything on this or not, but a number of things make me look around and think it almost looks like we wanted this thing to fail because we wanted to go back to conflict by introducing that on the 7th day, not even the 30 days, just 7 days in. And of course, then that started off.
I will add one possible explanation for that. That's oil. I've said since the beginning that Wall Street was in trouble. The Fed or primary dealers, once the war started and oil was heading up, they weren't ready for $150 oil. There would have been catastrophic losses in the derivative market. And one thing the MOU did accomplish for the United States is dropping the future price of oil down to here, allowing whoever was short oil, basically allowing the big players, inside players that were short oil and trying to keep the price down, to get themselves out of their pickle in the derivative markets. See, now that oil's going up, it's going to be allowed to go up to 150 because the Fed or primary dealers, I can't tell you who it is, but I know that it's someone had positions in the derivative market, would have taken catastrophic losses if oil had been allowed to go where it should, 150 right at the beginning. They kept it down. MOU allowed this plunge, which allowed those players that were in a bad position in the derivative market with regard to oil to get themselves out of their trouble. And now that's why Trump is so confident in doing this war, is probably for weeks now, Secretary of Treasury has been telling him, we need to get oil prices down or the financial system is fucked. And once they signed the MOU after that first week, that the derivative problem was solved. And that's why Trump is so more aggressive. Is up to now, his hands have been sort of tied in the war in that he has to help manipulate the market and everything just to keep the financial system from crashing. Now that's over. Now he can just do whatever and not worry about the price of oil anymore. At least in terms of the financial system crashing. He still needs to worry about political fallout of high gas prices.
All this did for TAD, especially from the 7th of July forward, where we're now it's 11 straight days of attacks. Is there any concern on the Iranian side that really why even bother with this? Because if that didn't work after 7 days, why would something on the 10 days work later on? And that actually leads into the second question that I have for you regarding that. What do you understand about the battle inside of Iran, those who do want this negotiation and those who are saying, I told you we shouldn't have had a negotiation first? Well, I don't know if it's Ghalibaf or the IRGC that's saying, we're in the position of military superiority right now. We have the leverage with the Strait and now possibly with Bab al-Mandab. So we don't have to give in to anything. Let's just sit back and wait until the praying gets bad enough on America. Is that a consideration for some in Iran?
Yeah, two great questions. So the first one is the way they see what the Americans were attempting to do was the first thing the Americans were attempting to do was to try and, but what they were trying to do, what they believe the Americans were trying to do is not even break the MOU, which they were trying to do. They were trying to break the MOU. But separate to that, or in addition to that, there was this kind of testing to see how far they would go or how far they could go. And so they were trying to take control of the Strait and to see if Iran would let them. And the issue they had is because Iran was so strong and resolute in the fact that they had to have control of the Strait of Hormuz, Trump was then basically pressured into acting. So that's what the way they see it, in addition to obviously the Americans breaking it and not being consistent with the deal. In terms of the second question that you asked, which is, so what was the second question again?
It was about, is there a group with this IRGC, whoever this is, don't have a deal now at all, just let the pressure build up until they give us what we want?
Yeah, look, in Iran, I don't...
Yeah, that is what I would recommend. Again, after you hold the Strait of Hormuz closed 5 months, just hold it closed another month and, get a better negotiating position.
See it the way, and I haven't been there and spoke to all the different parties, all the different political persuasions. It's not that there is this kind of disagreement. There is obviously you have Ghalibaf, Araghchi, and Pezeshkian, who are essentially the negotiators. Now, the will of the people is totally different to what the government wants. This is obviously quite clear. The government, as I mentioned, are always willing to negotiate. The people do not want negotiations. When you go into Iran, when you went to the funeral, people were persistent and consistent that they wanted a response. They wanted revenge. They wanted justice. The red flags were everywhere. The red flags of revenge. There was more red flags than there were flags of the country of Iran. they want revenge. Similar to not just the 3 funeral processions I went to, but even there is the Revolutionary Square, and you have tens of thousands of people in one of the days, hundreds of thousands of people with the red flag. They want that. And so if you remember the statement by Mujtaba Khamenei where he said, we want revenge, this wasn't Mujtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader. This was him just relaying what the people are saying. And such was the level of passion of the people that they do not want a deal with the United States of America. This has obviously pressured the negotiators because they're not able to make a deal or make any concessions when you have that type of scenario. Not that they wanted any concessions, but even talking to America was something that was considered off limits. In addition to that, when you go to Iran, what you find is that the Americans and the Israelis struck civilian areas intentionally. And it's quite clear that it was intentional because there's a number of those areas, and I did a report on this, they're not military bases. There's no military bases close by. Some of them are civilian apartments, civilian buildings. There was a Jewish synagogue, and it had Jewish apartments all around, which what I mean by that, it was Jewish people living on those apartments. And when I spoke to those people, they believed that that strike was intentional by Israel because they were angry with them because they believed that they were Iranian, they were against Israel, they were against Zionism, and so they believed that they were punished. In addition to that, if you look at the other locations that we hit, people believe
Israel attacking Jews. Would you believe that?
For example, the fertility clinic. Once again, people believe that that was intentional. The attack on the journalistic News 2 studio, they believe that that was intentional, Azadi Square. So all of these, they believe that they were intentional, and therefore, because there was no military bases close by. And so what you've got is a population who definitely doesn't want a deal. Now, in terms of the leadership, what the leadership is trying to do is they're trying to balance the will of the people with this notion that, you need to negotiate with the enemy to try and come to some kind of resolution.
You have countries like China, which are allies of Iran, that definitely want a deal. They want it straight open.
And you can't have a perpetual war. But that being said, when I'm explaining all of that, and I don't think there's a disagreement within the leadership, I think the position of the negotiators is something that is being relayed by the Supreme Leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, and they are carrying out his orders. And if the MOU you look at it, it was a surrender document. So why would they not sign it? That being said, the 10 days statement that is being made from Qatar, my understanding is that Iran isn't or won't sign that as per the current mechanism by which it is they are not willing to agree to a deal now. Even that brings you back to the MOU, which that 10-day pause wasn't, because they want serious concessions. And so it would only be serious and major concessions in addition to what's already in the MOU, which would bring Iran back to the table. But no, I don't think there's any kind of disagreement between the different groups within Iran. There is normal political disagreement. Of course, you do have the far right in Iran, and they are very not happy that the negotiators are negotiating. And then you obviously have the negotiators, and then you have the government and the different branches within Iran. And obviously there's political, philosophical disagreement. But in terms of them working against each other, that's clearly not happening.
Yep, I agree with that. That was a good little summary of the situation in Iran. And yes, I believe they've been very successful in taking out U.S. bases piece by piece. Yeah, everything is going in Iran's favor in this war so far. And the United States position just gets weaker and weaker. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. You can watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.